You are into the Winklerverse. Thank you for being here. And thank Jake Kocorowski for being here as well. He's been covering the Badgers for a long time, and he'll continue to do that for you at Badger Observer. Sign up at BadgerObserver.com. It's his new Substack. Recruiting will be covered. Volleyball will be covered. The football team will be covered. You are like, what, weeks into this new endeavor? That's scary. Been there. How you doing?
Thanks, Bart, man. It's always great talking with you, my man. No, it's scary, man. I know we were talking before we started recording this, but you're not just a reporter, you're not just a founder of a new publication. You're also a small business owner, and that's kind of the scariest thing of there's a business side to things that you need to accomplish within this, and your taxes, other things, and hitting goals and benchmarks. But it's an exciting time. I've enjoyed every publication that I've written for and I've reported for throughout my time. But there was a time after no longer being part of the State Journal in late March. This has always been kind of in my head of going out on my own, and it's obviously I have so many years covering Wisconsin football and recruiting, and the big thing with volleyball coming, obviously the Badgers are a blue blood underneath Kelly Sheffield and what they've done. And there's, in my eyes, not nearly enough coverage in terms of player profiles, staff profiles, among other projects that could be used to cover them and report on. And so that's where kind of Badger Observer kind of came to light and came to life that way. And it's been fun, 2.5, 3 weeks in, I would say right now to fall, since we started, and going strong, going steady. And we got a lot more coming, coming in the next few weeks, especially with the start of high school football, the Badgers football season, and then volleyball kicks up too. I mean, there's a scrimmage in the first exhibition game for Wisconsin come up this weekend. So there's plenty more to come at Badger Observer. I'll be busy.
Yeah, and that's why now's getting it off the ground, but now is a good time to sign up because everything is getting started with football. You've been a trusted voice on that for a while. Recruiting. I mean, people that love recruiting, you either don't care too much or like it's your life. So you'll have some good access there. And then volleyball, I mean, we're seeing just look at like on TV, big networks, broadcast networks are like, oh, this will pop a number and we'll do well. And there's a lot of interest in there. So like, just before we get into football and all this kind of stuff, you're like next month. Have you mapped that out where you're like, I got to be at a high school game here. You're going to Florida to check out some recruits. There's volleyball, there's football. Just keeping the calendar alone for you sounds like a job.
It really is. I need to hire, if there's any college students that want to be unpaid interns on a ground up publication. I would never do unpaid internships. I would feel terrible doing that. I know you and I have experienced, I'm guessing you and I have experienced things in the past where, us growing up through sports media.
I'm still a guy that advocates that doing an unpaid internship is beneficial, but nobody likes that. I mean, I don't know.
I hear you.
You want to get paid and you're doing work and you don't want to get taken advantage of, but it's also like, don't miss your opportunity. But I think the last guy that like said that online, that like advocated for that, got attacked.
Oh,
not like physically, but like you suck, dude. So I keep that one quiet.
I got you, man.
But then again, if I were to have an intern, let's say in some crazy reality, I'd be like, I got to pay this guy.
No, I get no. It's a crazy time for sports media, especially. I mean, it's especially trying to like, even with we've talked about this. And we'll get back to the schedule part in a second. But I mean, even just what we've seen throughout Wisconsin, those that cover Wisconsin football, just the opportunities dwindling in terms of the number of people covering sports. And it's not just Wisconsin, but using the Badgers beat as people are moving around. People are,
Did you see Mike Tomlin the other day?
No.
So Mike Tomlin, there's this video of him after, I think Pittsburgh was in Jacksonville for a preseason game. I think that's who they played. And they're there. And Mike Tomlin's like, all right, here's my opening statement, blah, blah, blah. Any questions? Looks around and says, no. Okay, good. And it went kind of viral because it's like, oh, nobody asked a question. That's weird. Nobody asked a question because nobody sent any reporters there. That was why. There was nobody in the room to ask a question. So
Exactly.
it wasn't reporters being shy. It was reporters not being sent to go cover an NFL preseason game. Can't even get coverage for.
Oh, I know. Well, and that's the thing that is kind of the crux of my newsletter is, I'm not going to be able to get down to Alabama or to Oregon this year. The prices are there. I will admit I will be seeing Weird Al Yankovic in Madison on the 12th, which
At
is
the
at
Steve.
Yes, at Bree Stevens Field. Lifelong.
I call it the Steve. You got to get that going.
Steve, nice. Okay, yeah, no, I'm going. I mean, I have friends going. It's going to be it's my childhood, and you know how it is with us millennials, us geriatric millennials. Anything from our past, we got to go to. So you had that, but I am going. You talked about going to the Florida trip. Next weekend I'm going down to watch Jaden Petit, the 4-star wide receiver from Naples, and then going. Hopefully, I get credentialed for this. I'm still waiting confirmation on that, but. Matter Day, the powerhouse program in California, their quarterback is a Wisconsin commit Ryan Hopkins. So I'm driving from the southwest side of Florida over to Fort Lauderdale to watch Mater Day take on St. Thomas Aquinas, and people have talked about it. It's probably the most talked about high school matchup of that week. It's going to be one of the powerhouse matchups between a California, arguably the best team for high schools in the nation, taking on a top 10 team in the nation for a high school program. And so, it's part of that's being calculated, right? Where my goal is to go watch the Badgers, face Michigan in Ann Arbor. But it's also within that trip watching 2 high school recruits, stopping in Indiana to watch one. And then Sunday, Jack Janda, who's a tight end commit for Wisconsin for this 2026 class upcoming, he plays on a Sunday. So stay a little bit later, go cover that game, write something up about him, interview him. There's multiple pieces of content within that, and it's about being smart. And instead of contracting coverage and but it's not like I'm not watching what I'm spending. There is I am, when I go down to Florida, I am staying with friends. I am trying to conserve those costs. I'm not getting a big SUV. It's getting the economical
Take dinner afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. If I should be able to afford a Publix chicken tender sub, which is for those that are in Florida that are in the know, so those are always treats. But yeah, it's about being smart. It's still trying to get that coverage though, and there, how it. I believe there is such a benefit to authentic coverage and not just writing off of reports or others reports, like being authentic, being there live.
AI.
Exactly. So that's part of what Badger Observer is. And I mean, it's for right now, we have a great deal going on where $50 for a year subscription. Otherwise it's, and that'll be through the 29th of August. So it'll be through the first game of the season when, after the Badgers take on Miami of Ohio on the 28th. But it's my goal though with this too is, costs are going up. Costs have been high, for families and Badger fans. So it's also trying to maintain hey, I have 3 boys, I have a mortgage among other things, but I also want it to be, people have access to it. So right now, $50 a year. Otherwise it goes up to $7 a month or $69 a year, which is still relatively cheap compared to other sites. And that's what we're trying to do, is try to be cost effective, and have mutually beneficial, costs for everyone involved.
So BadgerObserver.com, as Jake mentioned, that's where he is at. That's where you can sign up, get in before that first game, which is on a Thursday at 11:30 at night. No, I think it's 8 o'clock. It's late.
I think it's 8.
On a Thursday. This Badger team. So here's how the way I've always felt about the Badgers is I am so into them at the start of every year. And the moment they lose a game, I'm like, well, that's it. That's it for me. They have not been that great as of late. This year, it's gotten to the point where someone asked me a week ago, hey, who's the quarterback, by the way? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I don't know who the quarterback is. Edwards. I don't know who the running back is coming in. So this year, 6-6 or whatever seems like a high mark. What are the challenges that you're already seeing that this team is going to face? And is there like any signs that maybe we are being a little just overtly pessimistic about what you've seen so far?
Right. I mean, yeah, it's tough. Like we talk about that, a high mark could be 6-6. I agree with you in an extent where 7-5, 8-4 would be a great season because of the schedule that they face. This is, I think, was it yesterday the AP top 25 came out, the preseason one, and there are 6 opponents. I think I saw it right. 6 opponents that were in the top 25. We don't know how they'll fare throughout the year. There could be major injuries or other things where they're disappoint. And those teams could fall out of the AP rankings, but that's half your regular season schedule right there. And they have to go to Alabama. They have to go to Michigan, who I know that, they fell off last year in Sharon Moore's first year, but they still got tons of talent and a 5-star quarterback that will be leading them. But Ohio State's at home. They go to Indiana, but then, we're not even talking about they have Iowa, the trophy games of Iowa, who will always be tough. And Minnesota, who underneath PJ Fleck, they've made it a competitive rivalry again after Wisconsin kind of mopped the floor for, 10, 15 years. And so, for Wisconsin, Billy Edwards Jr. is QB1. He, the Maryland transfer, I think he's a good fit for this offense just because he's got the height. He's basically kind of the prototype of what Jeff Grimes, the new offensive coordinator, wants with this offense. He's got a good arm. He's got the arm talent. He can air it out deep, because they blend this wide zone type scheme that you see underneath like a Sean McVay or a Matt LaFleur, variation of that. It's going to be run emphasis for this offense, which I think is music to everybody's ears that love Wisconsin. But you also, they like downfield passing, and Edwards can do that. They have the targets that are fast and wide receivers, Vinny Anthony II and Jaden Ballard, Trech Kekahuna, I think in the slot can be really dangerous, not just receiving the ball, but running the ball. And so, but it's an NFL style system that I think is going to help Wisconsin, and that's how Jeff Grimes kind of refers to it, where it's going to be multiple type of formations and personnel. And they're also going to make, defenses defend the entire field, not just with, a running back running the ball. It could be a wide receiver. We've seen that already. And we've seen Green Bay do that underneath Matt LaFleur, right? So, you've seen these types of variations within that kind of wide zone scheme. But those are kind of, the challenges are going to be that schedule. It's also, it's identifying certain things within the offense, for example, at left tackle where they had a young player, sophomore Kevin Haywood, go down in the spring with an ACL injury. And he was going to be he's kind of the next, I don't want to anoint him because you never want to put expectations on younger kids, but he could be the next great Wisconsin lineman going up through the ranks. But, his ACL injury, they had to go to the transfer portal and find Davis Heinzen, who's from the state, but, he's playing left tackle. He came from Central Michigan. Can they make sure that they can protect Billy Edwards in that regard? The other side is, for defensively, they got ran on so much last year. The last 5 games, they gave up an average of 200.2 yards per game and 12 total rushing touchdowns in the final 5 games. That's not, characteristic Wisconsin defense, from what was seen, recently underneath defensive coordinator Jim Leonard, who's now with the Broncos. But Mike Tressel and the new the defensive coordinator that's been there since Luke Fickell took over, and the staff, they've went to the transfer portal and they really, I think they hit really well on defensive linemen. They had 3 new defensive linemen that are bigger and they're longer in terms of, and they have some athleticism to them, but they also hit on the outside linebackers that are going to be more in that defensive front that are bigger and more athletic. And so they've gotten depth at both of those positions, which will help where, like you said, towards the end of the year, the defensive line maybe had 3 to 5 guys at most that were rotating in, but most of them, there's only like 3 that really got a significant number of reps on that defensive line. And that showed on wear and tear by the end of the season. So I think they've addressed that. Now it's time for, something that I said when I was at Badger Extra in the State Journal on a podcast where it's a prove it defense. Okay, like you're bringing in these guys, last year they brought in guys through the transfer portal and they recruited well, but they did the same this year with some players, both freshmen and transfer portal that are really intriguing, but now it's prove it. Now it's show that what you can do against an Alabama, show what you can do against Michigan or Ohio State. And so those are some of the challenges that they'll have to deal with going forward.
Now, the schedule, as you mentioned, and I'll share it here on the video stream. And there's a nice ad there. Okay. Miami of Ohio, late night, Thursday. Middle Tennessee, okay, at home. And then bam, Alabama. Maryland, bye week. Michigan, Iowa. Oh, geez, look at that. Look at October. My God. Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, bye week. And then Washington, Indiana, Illinois. How about that? Bielema and Minnesota. I think when they moved on from Christ and went to Luke Fickell, there was a lot of excitement about that, how good he was at Cincinnati. Could you point to anything as to why it hasn't reached the not even the most lofty expectations, but it really feels like, oh, this is less than we thought we were getting.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one point you can point to is just the injuries at quarterback, especially within what was Phil Longo's variation of an air raid passing scheme, where there's a lot on quarterbacks. So, Tanner Mordecai gets injured, has that hand injury during that Iowa game. And, Braden Locke, he was a great interview, a good person to talk to. It just wasn't the right fit, for both the 2023 and 2024 season. Tyler Van Dyke goes it down with 7 plays into the Wisconsin-Alabama game. I'm not saying Wisconsin's going to win that game against Alabama at home after you saw what happened, but you saw how Wisconsin was driving nicely a little bit. I'm not saying that would have continued, but Van Dyke, had that running ability plus the arm. Tanner Mordecai had that back in 2023. And I would argue Tanner Mordecai's rushing ability, especially against Nebraska and Minnesota, helped get those wins and make Wisconsin bowl eligible that season. But I think it goes to so there's injuries at quarterback. I also believe the scheme too when it came to the offense underneath Phil Longo. I like Phil Longo. I think he's a good football coach. I don't think it was the right. Looking back now, hindsight's 2020. Everybody wanted a passing offense for Wisconsin, right? Remember that when everyone's like, Paul Chris, like, oh, I heard Badger fans, oh, we can't pass the ball. We need something to pass. Well, there was an overcorrection, right? Yeah. Where you go to an air raid where they're trying to get athletes in space. That's the whole thing of trying to get them the ball and then they can make plays. Well, things didn't work out that way. I would say argue the hire of Jack Bicknell Jr. as offensive line coach for that first year wasn't a great, didn't pan out well. We've seen really good things from AJ Blazik in that regard last year and into this year. I think him, the offensive line coach for Wisconsin now, Blazik's done a great job recruiting, but also just getting the guys ready. And I think that his way of teaching has really resonated with that group. They love him. So I think those 2 hires early on, again, it's hindsight's 2020. But it,
2010 for me, I have 2010 vision.
I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous. As you can tell, these glasses, I don't. But you also, so those kind of led into that. But I also think too, now there are more players underneath that have been recruited by Luke Fickell and his staff. Now I think they're at a place now especially with the offense and who they've brought in for defense. I think, they've talked about culture and I think they've it's year 3. I think Fickell, and them have made adjustments to where I think this team, you can tell that, I've heard even from Braden Locke last year, he said Wisconsin's locker room is different from every other. And he meant that in the most positive way about just how close this team, this program is and how the players are close to each other. I think they've even refined that further within the team and just also, just with how, there are still players that were recruited by Paul Christ. They're still on this team like Preston Zachman, Riley Mahlman, Ricardo Hallman, some big name players like that. But I also feel, it's year 3 of Luke Fickell. They know what to expect. And I think the culture is also a little bit stronger too.
The football schedule, like I mentioned, it's going to be hard. After I'm soft booking you to come back on the show the week of Alabama. So find some time. Badgers hopefully are 2-0 heading into Alabama. So we'll catch up on the football stuff then. Again, sign up at BadgerObserver.com for all of this great insight. The other things that you cover, recruiting and volleyball. With recruiting, how much This is a tough one, I think, to tackle because it's the traditional way of recruiting. I don't know why anyone would want to be a college coach right now, because you are recruiting like crazy new people, but then you're also like every day you're with your current team, you're recruiting them to stay, with how the transfer portal, which you got to lump in with NIL. That seems like, if I were to cover that and you're going to cover that, that seems like that would be hard. Are you prepared to, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, part of it is, and it's also a challenge of, even when I was at the State Journal trying to figure out just what's the right amount of coverage in terms of high school recruiting, because there are like this age of NIL and the transfer portal,
with these 25-year-old kids being like, "Oh, I'm an NIL agent." You're not anything. What are you?
Well, that's the thing. They have. I mean, yeah, that's another part of it too. Where I'm hoping to dive a little bit more into NIL and talk to certain people about it. It's a hard thing to report about because I'm trying to figure out numbers that are trustworthy and who you trust within that frame is tough in that regard. But it is a tough thing to, and I give folks at 24/7 Sports and or 247 Sports and On3 and Rivals all the credit for diving into that. I have to do things a little bit differently because I can't. It's a Substack newsletter. I'm not trying to put out a small article on every single offer that goes out. It's with what I'm trying to do is, especially with recruiting, is watching these players live. And I know other sites do it too, where they go out to kind of do scouting reports. My goal is to go out there and get interviews with these players, but also show what they could bring to Wisconsin. And obviously the jump from high school to college is huge, but a lot of it is keeping up to date and on track, on the scene, just what some of these commits are doing for Wisconsin and at the high school level during their final year. And I will be covering a lot of in-state recruits for that matter too, especially in the 2027 class, where you have players that are, with Wisconsin's targeting a bunch of in-state players, most notably on the offensive line for the 2027 class. And so that's part of it. But it's also, trying to see who's coming to Madison for game days. And that's part of the things that I'll take a look to see who could, who's on Wisconsin's guest list really. And, but it's also hard too, where, in terms of how the staffs have changed throughout there wasn't, even in the last 2-3 years, we saw really ever since when Luke Fickell took over the program, and we saw a little bit of it with Paul Christ hiring, moving Mickey Turner from tight ends coach over to like a head of recruiting type of position. But they've really, added a lot of people to this recruiting staff. And you talk about it, right? With the players, you have to retain those players that are, and that's why they have a general manager now, Marcus Sedberry, and you have a director of player personnel and Ethan Russo, and then you have director of recruiting, Pat Lambert. So you have a lot of people that can help the coaches deal with the ins and outs of everything that's happening and you're seeing, especially now during the fall, it's going to be poaching season in terms of, programs that looking at doing the senior evaluations and maybe trying to flip one of the commits to their program. Right. And so talk about it. It's hard for a coach. It's also why they're paid as much as they are, I guess, because, there is so much now. And it's definitely different from what it was, even 7 years ago, 5-7 years ago.
Well, even different on that same kind of line of thinking. The other thing you're going to be covering is volleyball, which has been there. And it just seems like recently people are like, oh, this rules. And we want to cover this. And, oh, Wisconsin's good. And so for you covering both, they're going on at the same time. That's exciting. I think the weekend that Ohio State comes to Camp Randall, the Badgers have games Friday and Sunday of that weekend.
Yeah, I will be busy. It will be nonstop. I'm taking a look at that right now. Yeah, it is. I mean, and I know I picked it. People are looking at me like, "You sure you're not going to do basketball? Give yourself a little bit of a break." I'm like, "Nah, we're good. Like I'll be fine." And but yeah, that weekend is what UCLA. That's top 25 opponents with right now currently UCLA and USC that weekend. In between the Ohio State, Wisconsin game sandwiched between them. So it's going to be a huge weekend for Wisconsin athletics. But, for me, it's one thing what I did at Badger Extra in the State Journal, I loved doing it, was a series called One-on-One, where I talked to my goal was to try to get 2 student athletes per program and sit and talk with them. We couldn't cover every sport all the time because of this current nature of sports journalism and media, but I did my best to try to get to every program and highlight some of the players. And, volleyball was always one of those things where even before at the State Journal, I wrote about the volleyball team volunteering at the polls for the 2020 election. And it was in going into what my favorite one-on-one video interview I did for the Badger Extra was with Julia Orzel, who is a Polish volleyball player. And I spoke a little bit of Polish from my time at UW. Shout out to Penny Mirnowska for my 3 semesters of getting me by there. But it's, you chat up, you have a great conversation, and it was one of my favorite pieces that I think I've ever done in terms of just an interview. But this volleyball program, there's a lot of new pieces this year. There are a lot of transfers and new freshmen. And so part of leading up to the season is going to, I'm talking to these players about well, how do you mesh everybody together? It's sort of like football, like every year, how do you, with the transfer portal and recruiting, how do you become a team? You could be a team just with the jersey, but how do you really become a team? And how do you bond and form those bonds? And a lot of that comes from adversity, but it's also just, with the volleyball team, I can tell you, one of them, they had team dinners and playing games, and that's really helped them out. And so that article will be out before the season, in a week or two. But yeah, that's to me, it's really interesting. And you talked about the popularity, it's one of the best sports to watch on TV in my eyes. You watch it and you're just seeing the back and the forth and just and the volleys get, especially on those long volleys where you feel, even through the TV, you can feel the excitement within the whatever building they're at, especially if you're in a field house, which is, for those that haven't been to the Wisconsin or UW field house, it's small. It's where before the Kohl Center was built was when their basketball was played. It's very much on top of you a little, to that extent, but there's an energy. It's smaller than, the Kohl Center, obviously, but there is there's an energy to it. And when it's, when it's sold out and most of the time it's packed, that's one of college volleyball's best places to play. And so I think, you see that elsewhere throughout the nation with Louisville or Nebraska, Minnesota, Penn State, other places, or Texas. There's a real energy about volleyball. And you're seeing that even with the number of leagues that have formed, the professional volleyball leagues that have formed within the states in recent memory. I think there was 3 at one point. I think it might be 2 now with a merger, but you're seeing that as well. And so I think, especially with just Wisconsin and what they've done, especially since Kelly Sheffield's taken over since 2013, 2012-ish, that program's gone to new heights, including a national championship. And we're aiming to, it may not be necessarily all the takeaways from matches, if you will, but it's more player profiles, and trying to dive into the lifestyles of these players, talking about the staff, why they made, coming out tomorrow on Wednesday morning. I talked to Gary White, who now in this new position called Director of Player Personnel and Analytics, and we've heard about Director of Player Personnel in football and for college football. But okay, what does it entail for volleyball? And he laid out everything for me, where it's and there's multiple sides to everything. And it was a great conversation. So it's highlighting some of that, and just, sometimes for the casual fan, they may not be able to grasp everything with a sport, an emerging sport like volleyball. And I'm here to try to explain it all.
Yeah, we're in a different landscape than we were 10, even 5, even last year. And the thing that you do get with independent journalism is you can't you need to be good. You need to you need to give it your all, which then means that people that subscribe are going to get content that they know that was written, in a way that is trying to be not perfection, but you're not people. If people are going to subscribe, you're not going to not give them what they're looking for.
Exactly.
And that's the era that we're in. And this is just getting started. BadgerObserver.com. You can sign up there, get in before game 1 for some savings. But other than that, Jake, best of luck. I'm very excited for you. I think the schedule coming up, you're going to be tired a lot, but it's a good tired. It's good to be busy when you're doing something that you like.
Exactly. I'll have tons of pre-workout riding through me, whether or not I work out or not. The ample of the 400 milligrams or 400 grams of caffeine rolling through my system, brother. I'm used to that now, and it'll only continue and whatnot. But I appreciate you having me on, and I'll be ready. You know what? Pencil me in for that week. That Friday, if I'm down at the Weird Al concert, let's make it happen, buddy. I'll set up a little tripod. I'll smuggle in the tripod, and I'll have it off stage. So we, during Eat It or one of the other songs.
I talked to Weird Al once in 2013.
Did you?
On the music station I was at, I interviewed him, and I didn't want to bring up the song I brought up to him was "The Night Santa Went Crazy," I think. Or I Remember Larry, one of those two. That album got weird, that one.
Yeah.
But I liked it. It's good.
Yeah, no, that was bad hair day. That was bad hair day. Yep. I remember that playing on that cassette all the time during my youth, which probably explains a lot about me at this time of life. But yeah, man, but it's always great talking with you. Anytime you need me, I'm here for you, brother.
All right. We will be in touch. Jake Kocorowski, BadgerObserver.com. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, guys. Y'all take care. Be good.